Welcome to the Freed from Stuck podcast. Our guest today is Elizabeth Clamon, author, speaker, and coach. This is a woman of incredible courage to talk with us about her journey and the new book that she has just published. Today, we're going to be talking about how to blaze your own path by your own rules to pursue your dreams and achieve optimal health. And I'm your host, Susie Hayes. You can learn more about me at www.freedfromstuck.com. Hi, I'm Susie Hayes. I want to welcome you to the Freed from Stuck podcast. So many are all too acquainted with childhood abuse, chronic illness, trauma, and tragedy. Our guest today is Elizabeth Clamon. She's a professional speaker, naturopath, author, coach, and expert in overcoming trauma and tragedy. She shares her insights about how to blaze your own path by your own rules. Elizabeth has not only survived, but thrived despite childhood abuse, chronic illness, and being left disabled and bedridden for 12 years by an auto accident. She is passionately dedicated to helping others overcome adversity, to relentlessly pursue their dreams, and to achieve optimal health. She is also releasing a new book tomorrow that she will be telling us about today. Welcome, Elizabeth. It's good to have you with us.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here and join you today.
So you have an amazing story of how you have become freed from stuck in numerous ways. And you particularly have this new book coming out that you're very excited about. So I'd like to just give you the time to tell us about the book, about the journey.
The journey in this book started before I was ever born. And a lot of people, I tell this book is not only a memoir of my story of my first 30 some years, but also it's a reference guide for people who have chronic illness or people who have been through childhood traumas, to be able to give them resources and references for things that maybe they didn't know. Maybe they're stuck in a place of being chronically ill and wondering, how did I get here? And they don't even realize that, it could be from a trauma that happened to them earlier in life. So I go through my story of being born into a family who was not expecting me. I say my mother started having pains, and they thought she was having appendicitis. They rushed her to the hospital, and instead they had me.
Oh my goodness. So she wasn't even aware that she was pregnant.
She was not.
Oh.
And none of my family was aware that she was pregnant. She was 19 at the time. And so it was, the rural South in 1965, and those things just did not happen. But here I am anyway.
The gift that you are.
And, and I'm here for a purpose, and I know what that purpose is. And that purpose is to help other people who have been through a difficult childhood or traumas in their life or adversities, to be resilient, to teach them to be resilient. And I refer to myself as relentless, because I don't stop. People ask me all the time, how did you do that? Or how did you get up after 12 years? And I just can't quit. I just refuse to quit and to give up. So
were there points at that time in those 12 years where you wanted to give up?
Oh, absolutely. There were many times when I wanted to give up. When the pain was so severe and I had multiple injuries that took multiple surgeries, and the pain would get so severe, even pain medications weren't helping. And I would think, I just can't do this. I can't do this. But the alternative is to check out and to take your own life. And that wasn't an option for me, because I felt like that was leaving a legacy for my husband and my children that I did not want to leave. I did not want them going through the rest of their life going, why wasn't I enough for her to stay?
Mm.
Why didn't she choose me? And over just, taking the easy way out. And I couldn't do that. But there were times when it was pretty rough and it was pretty difficult. And there were times during this journey that my book is called Beauty Rising from Brokenness. And so there were many times during that journey as well. And I talk about one time in particular. My husband is in the military and he was deployed, and things were especially bad between my family and I, and letters were going back and forth, and emails and phone calls and messages, and it was just really, really bad. And I was talking to him, and he was deployed to France, and I was on our once a week phone call, and I said, I just want to disappear. And in his head, he thought that meant I wanted to check out. I wanted to just leave. To me, I just wanted to disappear from the reality of the situation, the pain of the situation. I just wanted to crawl in a hole somewhere and pull in the dirt over me and just hide for a little while and give myself time to heal, because I needed that time to be separated. But you can't always do that. And I talk about that in the book. There's times when we want to run away and hide. But I was a mother of 3 small children, a husband in the military that was being during the time of Desert Storm and Enduring Freedom, and after September 11th, where he was being deployed a lot overseas. And I couldn't just run and hide. I had to figure out a way to stay out and function. And I did that to the best of my ability, which was not always great, but I did. And
So the longing was for just some relief of the
yes,
pain.
yes, just some relief. And there were days when I told my children, I'm going to be in my room for a little while. And I'd go in my room and shut the door, and I would just rock in the rocking chair and stare at the wall, because I was just in so much pain emotionally, and so much turmoil. I just needed that escape. And at the time, I felt terribly guilty for it. But now I've realized that that's not such a bad thing. Sometimes we need to take some time for ourselves. And so I tell people now, I put my headphones in, I put my music on, I put my mask on that covers my eyes, for the eye mask for when you sleep. Mine's for when I have migraines. But I put that on and I'm like, I've disappeared. I can't see you, so I'm disappeared.
Time out, time out.
Yes, exactly. Time out. And that's okay. Sometimes moms need time out too.
Absolutely.
And so I did that. But my book goes into a lot of pre-birth trauma. It talks about how we can be traumatized from conception through 3 years old. That's considered pre-birth trauma. And that's not well known. We know that, babies can be affected by a mother smoking or drinking or being around, secondhand smoke and that kind of thing. But we don't realize that our mother's emotions, her environment, what she's going through can also affect us even in the womb. So we can be traumatized before we're ever born. And so I talk about that in the book. And I also talk about adverse childhood experiences. And I have a survey that people can go to my webpage. I have it in the book where they can go in and they can get resources. And there's a survey where they can go through and take the survey. And it asks things like, did you grow up in a home of an alcoholic? Did you have a parent that was imprisoned, or parents that were divorced? Because all of those things are traumas. Even if we have the absolute best of parents and they try their very, very best, those things do affect us. And the higher your ACEs score, the more likely you are to develop chronic illnesses later in life. And people don't really realize that. People are suffering with fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue and diabetes and all sorts of different chronic illnesses, especially the autoimmune illnesses. And they just keep, I don't understand why. I don't understand why. Well, it can relate back. And that's what I do with my clients when I work with my clients in coaching, is we go back and we tell the story. And so that they can identify those areas where they might have been traumatized. There might be some things. And we work through a lot of those things. And it's amazing how freeing that can be for them. And just like writing this book, even though I had been through counseling and had done a lot of journaling and everything, writing this book was very freeing for me, because when you put it down on paper, you get it outside where you can look at it, you can examine it, and you can figure out ways to heal it. And so that's really my purpose through the book, is to walk people through how those traumas happen, how they can happen, how they can result in chronic illness, which they did for me, and chronic fatigue and bronchitis and asthma and constant illness. And then how I walked the path of healing physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And I devote a chapter to each one of those that gives them resources of how they can heal, because I'm a naturopath by training. And so I try to give them ways that they can heal naturally. And then if they need more work, they can always contact me and we can work together in a coaching relationship or a mentoring relationship.
The element of trauma that you're talking about, I think, is something that is not recognized. I talked about this in my book, where I was going through a difficult period of my life where I had issues with my back in particular and was in severe pain. And I had a great support system around me, and people were, really helpful and attentive to the pain that I was experiencing. But it wasn't until I actually wrote my book, Free from Stuck, that I realized that not only had I been suffering in pain, but that I had experienced trauma in it. And that element was never identified for me, only in retrospect, and probably affected the longevity of my recovery. Because I was like yourself, you move through life and do what you need to do. But I think that if that had been recognized and attended to, my recovery period might have actually been less difficult, less challenging, and probably shorter. Mm-hmm. So I really am with you on this, Elizabeth, around the importance of identifying elements of trauma in our experiences.
Yes. And I've heard people have told me so many times, oh, I had a great family and I had a great background and I had, I've had a great marriage and I don't have any of that trauma, but they don't realize that. And then they're like, but I battle with this weight loss and I just can't get this weight off. No matter what I do, I can't get it off. So we start talking about things that maybe just a schoolmate said, just a flippant remark that might have stuck with them. And then it caused a trauma that they don't even realize. And like I use the example for myself. I used to love to sing with the radio. I would sing, well, I still do. I love to sing and I just sing. I get into the music. I love music. And when I was in high school, I had a friend riding to school with me and I was singing and I go, someday I think I'd like to be a singer. And she said, I think you need to get a new dream. Wow. And I never sang in front of anyone ever again. And it took me years to get over just that little flippant remark that she probably doesn't even remember. She probably has no idea, but it took me years before I was able to even, my husband would say, you have a beautiful voice, but that trauma back there was louder than what he said.
Yes, yes. I had a similar experience when I was taking a watercolor painting class, and I came in with this picture that I thought was really cool and different. And the art teacher looked at me and said, "Oh, that's just emotional junk."
Oh,
And I never went back to the class, and I never picked up a paintbrush again.
mm-hmm.
It's on my list to resume that because I love watercolor. But the impact, and I was an adult, the impact of that statement was, even though I was clear about, that that was an unkind thing to say and maybe even an inaccurate thing, it didn't matter. I mean, it just stopped me in my creativity, just stopped me dead in my tracks.
Right.
And very insensitive on her part, obviously, but it impacted me. So we never know when those things are going to alter how we experience ourselves.
Right.
So
Exactly.
in the suffering, I would love for you to talk a little bit about the, I know the focus of your new book is really on childhood trauma and some of
Mm-hmm.
those experiences. But I would like for you, if you would, to share a little bit about the experience of your car accident and those years following, and really the endurance and resilience that was cultivated in that. And I'd also like to hear about how that changed you and how it changed your life.
Oh, it changed my life dramatically. And the accident, when it happened, actually, I had just come out of Beauty Rising from Brokenness. I had just walked that path for about 3 years of counseling and getting back on my feet and coming out of that depression and anger. Had a lot of anger. I talk a lot about being a volcano in the book and being and erupting at any moment when no one was expecting it. But I had just gotten back on my feet from that, just finished my education, had contracted to have an office with a guy in his vitamin shop to start seeing clients, and was just really excited and went on vacation. And on the way back from vacation, we were coming into construction, and we had a semi truck in front of us that was not supposed to be in that lane. He was supposed to be in the other lane, and he slammed on his brakes because he thought he couldn't clear the bridge. And he slammed on his brakes, and we were towing our camper and we couldn't stop. So we hit him, the camper hit us. Our 16 and 18-year-old daughters were driving my husband's truck. They hit the camper and the camper hit us again. So we had 3 impacts in just simultaneously. And I really believe the reason that I was injured so badly was because I had my seat leaned back. I had been reading a book. I had my seatbelt on, but my seat was reclined. And so the airbag didn't do me much good because I was so far away from it. And my son had asked me a question. He was in the back seat of the Suburban we were in, and I had turned around to answer his question. So my spine was completely rotated when we made impact, and I had no way to adjust for it. And I went from the scene of that accident by ambulance to the hospital, spent 5 days on the cardiac ward because my sternum was broken and they were afraid I may have heart damage. And then I went home, and it was just a completely different life. It was pain pills every 6 hours. It was somebody waking me up. It was somebody fixing food to bring to me. I couldn't fix my own food. Every time I tried to go up the stairs, my back would hurt so bad. I had to find the nearest place to sit down, and it just continued on. It took 18 months of physical therapy to get me back on my feet, out of a wheelchair even. And I tried every kind of treatment you can imagine. Being a naturopath, I did, acupuncture, I did massage therapy, I did chiropractic, I did everything that I possibly could, and nothing helped. And I just kept falling back on the pain management. And the pain management, all that pain medicine did was leave me foggy brained and sleepy and really checked out. I really felt like I wasn't even a part of life. I was separated. I spent most of my time in bed because that was the least painful place for me to be where my back was concerned. and I had a fusion on my back from the ruptured disc, and that didn't help. It was a failed fusion. It kept me from being confined to a wheelchair for the rest of my life, but it did not subside the pain. And I just continued. I did what I say, and I say bedridden because I was in bed most of the time. I would struggle to get myself out of bed to do something with my husband. We ride motorcycles. He loves to ride the motorcycle. He bought this big, comfortable bike with it has a recliner on the back of it, essentially, with a heated seat. And so I would drag myself out of bed to ride with him for an afternoon, and then spend the next 2 weeks in bed suffering from the pain of doing it. But I knew I needed to do that for him, to have that connection with him. But it was a very, very difficult time and depressing time. And it wasn't until I had my last surgery in December of 2014 that I was in the hospital, and they could not control my pain. And they continued I blew 3 IVs. Mm-hmm. They continued to give me more and more medication, and wanted my husband to take me home. You have to go home in 24 hours. You can't stay. You know how the insurance companies are now. They want you just out of there as soon as possible. My husband refused to bring me home. He said, I can't take her home. You can't control her pain here. How am I going to control her pain at home? And so in the midst of all of that, they let me stay in the hospital overnight. Of course, because I had nobody to take me home. They didn't have a choice, really, I guess. But I was going into shock because the pain was just so bad, because I had been on so much pain medication. I was on 150 Percocets a month, on 30 Dilaudid for breakthrough pain, plus getting shots in my back, in my neck, and in my occipital nerves for migraines. And my husband, I was just going into shock after having blown those 3 IVs, and they were still trying to give me medication, and it just wasn't working. And I was, through chattering teeth and sweating and shaking, I looked at my husband and I said, I'm done. I'm just done. And that's really the point you have to come to. You have to come to a point of, I'm finished. I'm not going to live this way anymore. That's the point I came to in Beauty Rising from Brokenness, with my family, and the way that they treated me, and the way that they continued to treat me and my children into my 30s. I got to a point where I just said, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. And I decided to change things. And I came to the same point then, where I just looked at him in that moment and said, I'm done. And I call that a mindset shift. I changed my mind in that moment. And I said, I'm no longer going to live like this. And I got home and I recovered from that surgery, and I made a plan to get off of all that pain medication. And I did it a half a pill at a time for a month. And then the next month I'd cut another half a pill out. And it took me a course of 6 months to get off of all that pain medication. And people say, well, after 12 years, how are you up now, and you speak, and you're writing a book, and you're doing book signings? It didn't happen overnight. I got up out of the bed and I sat in the chair for 30 minutes. And then I went and laid back down. And once I got to where I could do that and not be too uncomfortable, I stood up for 10 or 15 minutes and then sat back down or laid back down. And I slowly just increased it. And I tell people that with chronic illnesses too, when exercise, they're like, oh, I can't exercise. It's too hard. It's too much. Start with just 2 minutes. Just walk for 2 minutes and then go back and lay down, or go back and sit down. And then next week, add it to make it 3 minutes. And do it gradually, because nothing in this life is all or nothing. We try to make it all or nothing. We go on a diet and we say, we're all in. I'm not eating anything. And that lasts for a week, maybe 2. And then we blow it. And then once we blow it, we think, oh, well, and we go back to the way we were. If we would just take it baby steps, just like a baby doesn't jump up and run. They start out rolling over, and then crawling, and then pulling up and falling down, and pulling up and falling down. And you have to realize that's the process that you have to go through to get unstuck from whatever your situation is.
Absolutely. And I think your point is well taken, in that we we live in a culture that perpetuates quick change, easy gratification, and real change that you, like the kind that you're talking about, more often than not happens in small increments.
Yes.
It happens in small, simple choices with a cumulative effect of those choices.
Yes.
And that was part of your resilience. That was part of what you cultivated. You made the mind shift, but it wasn't just a shifting in your mind. It was a shifting in your heart, in your soul. You describe a very deep transformational point where
Right.
you made a decision that you were not going to suffer in the way that you had.
Right.
And you were going to do whatever you needed to do to figure out whatever you needed to figure out. And you were going to strategize in a way that was going to be manageable for the limitations in which you were feeling and experiencing this pain, ongoing pain.
Yes.
And over a period of time, the healing took place. And it sounds like what you're also describing was it wasn't just a physical healing, but there was something also at a deeper level that was taking place. I'm curious about that. What did you observe as you had made this shift in mindset and set this intention, this determination to create your life differently, whatever that would mean? What did you observe changed for you at that deep level?
I call that when my Cajun kicked in, because I'm from Louisiana.
Okay.
So my inner Cajun took over.
I love that. That's great. A little spice in life, huh?
Yes, exactly. That's when my inner stubborn Cajun spicy came in and said, you know, we're gonna make some changes. And you're right. You have to make those changes not just in your mind, because we can make up our mind to do a million different things, but it has to be a change that you feel in your heart. And it has to be something that you determine that I'm going to make this different. I'm not going to do this anymore. And it took that making a plan, but it also took 3 more years. It wasn't until 2017 that I actually had reached a point where I could start what I call living. I was existing. I was struggling to get back to the person I was. And I had to come to the realization inside of me that I'm not ever going to be that person again. I'm not going to be that person that can go for a 3-mile bike ride again. I'm not going to be that person that can go to the gym for an hour every day, 3 or 4 days a week. That's just not who physically I am anymore. I have to realize that. And it's hard because my spirit still wants to be that person. I'm a very A-type personality, and a lot of people who develop chronic illness, we are A-type personalities, and we push because we have this drive inside of us. And one of the things that helped me so much is a book called The Raging Sloth by Eric Eaton. And he talks about having a chronic hip condition that he didn't know he had. And he had to have surgery, and they damaged a nerve during surgery. So he has constant chronic pain. And he talks about how you have to give yourself grace. And I still have to do that. I have to realize that my back is not the same back that I had before. It has plates and screws, and it's fused together. It doesn't move the way it used to. The same thing with my neck, the same thing with my sternum. So I have to make adjustments and work around that. I would love to go out and speak 6 or 8 times a month, just like a lot of my friends do. I can't. I have to be exclusive. I have to pick and choose and say, I can do this and I can't do that. Even though my heart wants to do all of it, I have to make that idea inside of me, I have to choose what is not just what I want to do, but what is also best for me. And so it does have to come with a change of your mind, but you have to always also come with a change of a realization in your heart that you're not ever going to be that person again. And when I talk to chronic pain, I talk to a lot of chronic pain support groups, and they're like, "Oh, we thought you were going to come in here and say you had a miracle, and now you're just back to normal and you have no pain." No, I have pain every day. I don't I don't claim to not live that way. I do, but I have to adjust my life. But I have this drive to be out and to help people, and to have a purpose in this life, and to use what has happened to me to hopefully to encourage and make someone else's life better. And that comes from my heart, that comes from my spirit, and it's something that cannot be quenched. No matter how many times I get knocked down, that within my heart and spirit makes me get back up and continue, because I just feel like I was put here for a purpose, and all these things did not happen to me for me to just sit in my bed all day. They happened to me so that I could help someone else who's having a hard time, who's going through something difficult as well.
And you speak to an element in the change process, whether it is chosen or not chosen, and that is the element of grieving that is required.
Yes.
And, we see a lot of, I call them sort of cotton candy approaches to change, where, if you just get to a happy place, you can create change in your life. And in reality, very often the most powerful and significant change takes place at those points of the dark night of the soul.
Yes.
And it's not anything that we would wish on anyone else or invite into our lives again, but suffering and tragedy and trauma are a part of the human experience. And what you're addressing, Elizabeth, is that you're addressing the tough stuff of change.
Right.
That sometimes it means letting go of even what you might not want to let go of. It means grieving deeply, and it means going into your heart and your soul. And you described it as connecting with a deeper sense of purpose and meaning, and making a decision that even though your life is not ideal in the way that you would have wished it to be or how it might have been at one point, your connection to that purposefulness, your connection to living your life with meaning and contributing and participating in a way that minimizes suffering for other people.
Yes.
That suffering is a reality, but we do have choices to minimize that. And we do have choices in how we're going to show up, even in our pain and our suffering. This is the tough stuff of life.
Yes.
And you are so well acquainted with this in a way that has not left you frightened or bitter or resentful. Not that I suspect you maybe had to process some of that, right? That's sometimes
Absolutely.
part of the grieving process. But that you've really come through that to a place where your focus is on something that has great value for you. And that is the purpose and the meaning of your message that comes out of your life experience.
Right, exactly. And one of my favorite sayings is I tell people bad things happen to everybody. If anybody out there has not had a trauma or a tragedy or an adversity that they've come up against, please call me and tell me about it, because I've never met anyone who has not been through something. And you can make a choice to either be better or to be bitter. And if you make the choice to be bitter and say, well, this shouldn't have happened to me, this is not fair, and you sit there in that bitterness and that self-pity, you're not doing anybody any good. You're not doing yourself any good. You're not doing your family any good. You're not doing anybody in this world any good. You have to make a choice to say, I'm going to take this bad thing and I'm going to use it to help me be better and to help someone else be better. So you can either choose to be better or you can choose to be bitter. And I choose to be better.
Beautifully said. Pardon me, I have to cough. Okay, I'm gonna have to edit that one out. Hang on. I was just through my first interview this morning, right at the end, and he was making this beautiful closing, and all of a sudden I just started coughing. I said, I'm so sorry.
Take two. That's the good thing about editing.
It is the good thing about editing. So, all right. So, Elizabeth, as we're wrapping up here today, I want to give you a few minutes to talk about your new book that is coming out tomorrow. Yes? Are you excited?
I am so excited. And to tell you the honest truth, I'm a little bit exhausted because I have been going like crazy promoting this book. I just want to get it into the hands of as many people as possible so that it can help as many people as possible know that there is hope and healing. You don't have to stay where you are. There is always hope, and there can always be healing, even when you've given up. And there's times when I have given up and I had to whip myself back into shape, or my family members had to say, I'm not having this, you're not doing this. So sometimes we need those outside voices too. So definitely, I'm a little bit exhausted, but I am so excited for it to come out tomorrow.
And what is the title of the book, and what's it about?
The title is Beauty Rising from Brokenness, and it's Journey Through Childhood Trauma and Chronic Illness into Healing. And it's my journey from pre-birth through my mid-30s, when I tell people it's like having a beach ball that you keep pushed under the water when you're dealing with childhood trauma and with an abusive childhood. You try to keep those things hidden and you keep that beach ball. But the older you get, the harder it gets to keep that buried and keep that beach ball pushed down. And I like to use a lot of analogies in the book. And I got to a point in my life where I just couldn't hold it together anymore. And I literally came apart, and that's the brokenness. I talk about the cracks and how they start and how they get bigger until you're just a big, open, broken vessel that has to get all of that negative and bad out so that you can be filled up and you can be healed. And like I said, it brought me to a point of chronic illness, of chronic fatigue syndrome, and also severe asthma that was just so out of control. I couldn't even smell a flower. I would have an asthma attack. I couldn't go out in the cold air. I would have an asthma attack. Just any little thing could throw me into an asthma attack. And I realized, studying naturopathic medicine, that the airways are a representation of grieving. And so when you have something that manifests in the airways, it's because you're grieving. And I was grieving a lot of things that I talk about in the book. And I got to a point where I realized I needed outside help. And I hired a counselor. And I tell people, don't walk the journey alone. The book is about walking the journey to healing. How I walked it, it's also a reference book that gives them lots of information on, other resources and things that they can tap into to help them with that. And it's available on Amazon. And it is also available in hardbacks, and available on Amazon in ebook and on paperback. And then it's available through me. You can get the hardcovers, and I have those at all my speaking events. And I'm doing a lot of libraries and book signings and book fairs and things like that. So just want to get it out to as many people as possible so they can know that there's hope and there's healing, and they don't have to stay stuck where they're at.
Thank you so much today, Elizabeth. It's been a really amazing conversation about some really important issues that need to be attended to. And your message is strong and authentic and vulnerable and so needed in the world. So thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you so much for having me on and let me talk about the book and hopefully be able to help more people, because that's the whole point. That's the reason I'm still here.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you, you too.
Be sure and check out information about Elizabeth Clamon. Her book is Beauty Rising from Brokenness. You can get information from her website at elizabethclamon.com. And be sure and connect with me. You can find my information at www.freedfromstuck. I'm open to your feedback and suggestions about this podcast, and if you know someone who's interested in being interviewed, please have them contact me. Thanks so much.